The world of high-stakes journalism and geopolitical power is a dangerous place. For a seasoned Saudi journalist like Jamal Khashoggi, it was a world he knew intimately, a landscape where his pen had always balanced precariously between patriotism and critique. For decades, he had been an insider, a fixture in the corridors of Saudi power, often advising princes and editing major newspapers. He was a man deeply loyal to his homeland, but also a dedicated advocate for reform, for freedom of speech, and for a more open society. This unique position, this proximity to power combined with a growing willingness to speak truth to it, ultimately made him a target. Jamal Khashoggi was born in Medina in 1958, a member of a prominent Turkish Saudi family. His career was long and distinguished. He was a foreign correspondent covering conflicts from Afghanistan to the Middle East, becoming renowned for his interviews with Osama bin Laden in the 1980s. He held prestigious editorial roles, but his tenure was often cut short when his reformist views or editorial decisions crossed the invisible, shifting lines of acceptable discourse in the kingdom. He was fired from the paper Al-Watan twice for pushing the boundaries of debate. Khashoggi was not a radical dissident. He was an intellectual, a loyal critic who believed his voice could guide his country toward a better future. The crucial shift came in 2017 with the dramatic rise of Mohammed bin Salman, known throughout the world as MBS. This young, ambitious crown prince quickly consolidated power, launching bold economic and social reforms that were, on the surface, appealing to the West, lifting the ban on women driving, opening cinemas, and promising a more modern Saudi Arabia. But beneath the glittering veneer of modernization, a far more brutal reality was taking shape. MBS's rule was marked by a fierce crackdown on dissent. Intellectuals, activists, religious figures, and even rival princes were rounded up, arrested, and silenced. The space for any form of criticism, even the constructive, loyal criticism Khashoggi practiced, vanished. In September 2017, Jamal Khashoggi chose self-imposed exile. He moved to the Washington, D.C. area, where he began writing a monthly column for the Washington Post's Global Opinions section. This platform gave his voice unprecedented international reach and legitimacy. His columns were measured but pointed, criticizing the crackdown on critical voices, opposing the Saudi-led intervention in Yemen, and condemning the growing authoritarianism under MBS. He supported the social changes, but he strongly opposed the simultaneous political repression. His words became a powerful counter-narrative to the Crown Prince's carefully curated image as a great reformer. This was the point of no return. Khashoggi, the insider, had crossed the line and become an influential outsider, a visible threat to the Crown Prince's absolute authority. His personal life, meanwhile, was blossoming. He had met Hatice Cengiz, a Turkish scholar, and the two were planning to marry. In the summer of 2018, Khashoggi needed certain documents to finalize his divorce from his previous marriage and enable his union with Hatice. These documents had to be obtained from his home country's diplomatic mission. He was forced to deal with the same state that had driven him into exile. On September 28, 2018, Khashoggi made his first visit to the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. The atmosphere seemed, at least initially, cordial. He was treated well, and the staff promised to have the necessary documents ready for him. They told him to return in a few days. He left the consulate, met Hatice Cengiz, and seemed relieved. Yet, behind the scenes, a chilling, meticulously planned operation was already being set in motion. In the days that followed his first visit, a highly secretive group was mobilized within Saudi Arabia. This was no amateur operation. It was a 15-member team composed of Saudi operatives from various security and intelligence organizations. Among them were individuals with close ties to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and his inner circle, including a forensic pathologist and senior intelligence officers. This was an assassination squad, not a diplomatic delegation. The team flew into Istanbul on two separate private jets, arriving in the early hours of October 2, 2018. They checked into two five-star hotels near the consulate. Their mission was clear: to capture, or more likely, to eliminate Jamal Khashoggi. Unknown to the Saudis, the Turkish intelligence services had taken extraordinary measures. Fearing Saudi-on-Saudi crime on their soil and possibly anticipating a move against a prominent dissident, they had bugged the consulate building. What happened next would be captured, minute by agonizing minute, on audio recordings. The morning of October 2, 2018, Khashoggi and Hatice Cengiz arrived at the consulate, a nondescript building in the Levent district of Istanbul. He was still worried, telling Hatice, "I don't think they'd do anything in Turkey." But a knot of apprehension lingered. He handed Hatice his 2 mobile phones, instructing her to call a Turkish presidential aide if he did not return. At 1:14 p.m. local time, Jamal Khashoggi walked through the front door of the Saudi consulate. He smiled a final time at his fiancée waiting outside. He was never seen leaving. Inside the consulate, the atmosphere immediately turned from diplomatic to deadly. Khashoggi was reportedly greeted by a familiar face, possibly a staff member, before being pulled by the arm into the consul general's office on the 2nd floor. The 15-man squad was waiting. The audio recording, later transcribed by Turkish officials, paints a horrifying picture of his final moments. Khashoggi was confronted, then ambushed. The recording captures the sounds of a struggle, a desperate fight for survival. He was reportedly told, "You are going back to Saudi Arabia." When he protested that he couldn't, a member of the squad allegedly said, "We will bring you back." The chilling climax of the encounter was captured by his desperate, repeated final words, "I can't breathe." He uttered this phrase at least 3 times. The struggle lasted approximately 7 minutes. Turkish officials later concluded that Khashoggi was strangled shortly after entering the building. What followed the murder was equally gruesome and spoke to the calculated, cold-blooded nature of the operation. The forensic pathologist on the team, Dr. Salah Muhammad al-Tubaigi, allegedly began the process of dismembering Khashoggi's body. The audio tapes reportedly captured the distinct sound of a bone saw, an unnerving sound for the assassins themselves. Dr. Tubaigi was heard advising others to listen to music to block out the noise. Meanwhile, outside, Hatice Cengiz waited and waited. The afternoon wore on, and the consulate doors remained firmly shut. Her concern turned to dread, then to full-blown panic. Hours after Khashoggi had entered, she made the call he had requested, alerting the Turkish authorities. The cover-up began almost immediately after the murder. The 15-man squad acted swiftly to erase all trace of their crime. CCTV footage from the consulate was tampered with or removed. One member of the squad, dressed in Khashoggi's clothes, a fake beard and glasses, was seen on security tape leaving the consulate building. A body double attempting to establish a false narrative that Khashoggi had walked out alive. This man then travelled to a historic site in Istanbul before discarding the disguise and leaving the country on one of the private jets later that day. By evening, all 15 members of the assassination team had left Turkey, flying back to Riyadh with a horrifying secret and, crucially, without Jamal Khashoggi's body. The disposal of Khashoggi's remains one of the darkest, most enduring mysteries of the case. They were never found, leaving his family, his fiancée, and the world without a place to mourn. This level of preparation, from the deployment of a specialized team to the meticulous efforts to obscure the evidence, immediately suggested that this was not a rogue operation, as the Saudis would later claim. This was a sophisticated, state-sponsored act of murder, carried out on the orders of the highest levels of the Saudi government. The world first registered Jamal Khashoggi's disappearance as a missing person case. On October 3, 2018, the day after he vanished, Saudi Arabia issued a statement insisting that the journalist had left the Istanbul consulate shortly after his visit. Turkish officials immediately pushed back, suggesting Khashoggi was still inside. They knew better. They had the recordings. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his government held a powerful hand. They did not immediately release the shocking audio evidence, opting instead to leak carefully calibrated details to the media. This strategic drip feed of information created a relentless drumbeat of international pressure on Riyadh, forcing the Saudis to react and, crucially, to lie repeatedly. Within days, the media began to report the chilling details coming from anonymous Turkish sources. The notion of a 15-man hit squad was introduced, complete with flight manifests, names, and even official positions within the Saudi state apparatus. This wasn't a random collection of thugs. Several men were security and intelligence officers with direct ties to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and his most trusted advisor, Saud al-Qahtani. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to form a terrifying picture. The initial Saudi narrative, that Khashoggi had left the consulate unharmed, collapsed under the weight of the evidence, particularly the televised surveillance footage showing the body double in Khashoggi's clothes. The global media demanded answers. 18 days after the disappearance on October 20, 2018, Riyadh dramatically changed its story. In a stunning reversal, the Saudi government admitted that Khashoggi was dead. Their new explanation, however, was as flimsy as the first. They claimed Khashoggi had been killed in a fistfight inside the consulate. The 18 Saudi nationals arrested, they asserted, were involved in a rogue operation gone tragically wrong. The aim, they argued, was merely to persuade Khashoggi to return to the kingdom. This explanation satisfied no one. How could a disagreement escalate into a fatal brawl involving a team of specialized security personnel and a forensic doctor? And where was the body? The international scrutiny intensified, leading the Saudis to shift their story yet again. On October 25, 2018, the Saudi Attorney General finally admitted that the killing was premeditated. The focus was squarely on damage control, attempting to sever the direct link between the brutal act and the person at the top, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Saudi officials quickly dismissed a handful of senior intelligence figures, including the influential Saud al-Qahtani and Deputy Intelligence Chief General Ahmed al-Asiri, positioning them as the masterminds of the operation. The physical investigation proceeded slowly and amidst constant diplomatic friction. Turkish police, accompanied by Saudi officials, were finally allowed to search the consulate building. They found evidence of a struggle and, more sinisterly, chemical residue suggesting that the assassins had attempted to destroy or remove physical evidence. Turkish sources spoke of chemicals used to clean the diplomatic offices. The search was expanded to the consul general's nearby residence, where a similar trail of evidence tampering was discovered. Khashoggi's body, however, remained elusive. The existence of the audio recordings was the linchpin of the Turkish investigation. While never publicly released by the Turkish government, transcripts and key details were shared with allied intelligence agencies, including those of the United States. This evidence provided undeniable proof that the journalist had been murdered, not in a fight, but as part of a cold-blooded plan. In the weeks that followed, U.S. intelligence agencies began their own analysis. Their conclusion would send shockwaves through Washington and Riyadh. By mid-November 2018, the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, reportedly assessed with high confidence that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had personally ordered the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi. The agency based its finding on intercepted communications, the specific composition of the hit team, which included members of the Crown Prince's personal security detail, and the sheer implausibility that such a sensitive operation could have been carried out without his authorization. He held absolute control over the kingdom's security and intelligence apparatus. For global leaders, the question shifted from what happened to who was responsible. President Trump and his administration initially sought to downplay the CIA's finding, prioritizing the geopolitical alliance and multi-billion-dollar arms deals with Saudi Arabia. Yet, the moral gravity of the crime could not be ignored. Lawmakers in the US and Europe demanded accountability. The United Nations launched its own inquiry. In June 2019, UN Special Rapporteur Agnes Kalamar released a comprehensive 101-page report on the killing. Her investigation concluded that the assassination was a premeditated extrajudicial execution for which the state of Saudi Arabia was responsible. Crucially, the report stated that there was credible evidence warranting further investigation into the individual liability of high-level Saudi officials, including Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Calamar's report highlighted the meticulous planning and the official resources used, the use of government jets, the high-ranking positions of the team members, and the sophisticated nature of the cover-up. She argued the Saudi government's internal legal process was flawed and called for an international investigation. Riyadh, however, was determined to keep the matter internal and firmly under control. The Saudi public prosecutor moved forward with a closed-door trial against 11 unnamed individuals accused of the murder. These proceedings began in a secretive manner in the Saudi capital. The trial was widely condemned by international human rights organizations and governments for its lack of transparency and independence. Key details, including the identities of all the defendants and the full extent of the evidence presented, were withheld from the public and independent observers. The UN rapporteur criticized the proceedings as potentially shielding the high-level masterminds. In December 2019, the Saudi court announced its initial verdicts. 5 individuals were sentenced to death for committing the murder, while 3 others were sentenced to prison terms totaling 24 years for covering up the crime. Crucially, 2 of the highest-profile individuals implicated in the intelligence reports, Saud al-Qahtani and General Ahmed al-Asiri, were investigated but ultimately acquitted or had charges dismissed due to insufficient evidence. This outcome solidified the global consensus that the trial was a whitewash designed to protect those at the very top of the Saudi power structure. Then, a final controversial twist was introduced into the Saudi legal process. In Islamic law, the family of a murder victim can exercise a right of pardon. On May 22, 2020, Jamal Khashoggi's children announced that they had pardoned the 5 men who had been sentenced to death. This decision, they stated, was made in adherence to Islamic values, but it immediately commuted the death sentences to prison terms of 20 years. Critics immediately questioned the sincerity of the pardon, suggesting the family was under immense pressure from the state to deliver an outcome that further minimized the legal and international fallout for the kingdom. Ultimately, the official Saudi legal narrative stabilized. A group of agents carried out the murder in a tragic yet locally contained incident, and those directly responsible faced justice. The connection to the Crown Prince and his inner circle was officially denied and dismissed. Yet, the facts gathered by Turkish intelligence, the conclusions of the CYA, and the judgment of the United Nations pointed to an irrefutable conclusion. Jamal Khashoggi was murdered by the state he had sought to reform, and the operation was executed with the explicit knowledge, and likely the direct order, of the kingdom's de facto ruler. The price of free speech for Jamal Khashoggi was his life. His voice was silenced, but his story still echoes, a haunting reminder of the cost of truth.